Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is the first of our 2024 calendar for NASHIA on effective communication between providers and clients, offered by the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maria Crowley, NASHIA's Director of Professional Development, and I'm going to be moderating this session today. Just a few housekeeping details before we get started. Closed captioning is available by enabling that at the bottom of your viewing window. If you need assistance for today's webinar, please send a chat to us through Zoom or go to Zoom's support site. We welcome any questions that you have, and you can put those in the Q&A in your viewing window, or you can put those directly in the chat, and we'll address those questions at the end of today's presentation. NASHIA is a nonprofit organization created to assist state government in promoting partnerships and building systems to build the needs of individuals with brain injury and their families. NASHIA is a membership organization as well, and we offer several different membership categories. We would welcome you to join us, and please view our website for all of the available options. There are many benefits to membership, including connecting with our member directory and a lot of the training opportunities that may be free or at reduced charge for you. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. NASHIA also provides a lot of technical assistance on a number of topics, and we provide support in these areas and many more. You can find out information about that as well by emailing us. General certificates of attendance and social work CEs are available for today's event. Certificates are free for NASHIA members, and social work CEs are at a reduced rate for NASHIA members. Both are available for a minimal fee for non-members. You'll receive an email after today's webinar or tomorrow morning with a link for a general feedback form. There will also be a link in that email for your certificates of attendance. If you're a member, contact me for your promo code for either certificates or social work CEs. The certificate and evaluation links, as well as the recording, will also be available on our website for later access. For viewers of the recording, go to Trainings on Demand to find out more information about how to obtain a certificate. Now, I want to turn to the fun part of our webinar and introduce you to today's session and to our presenters. We're going to do a deeper dive into effective communication from both sides of the fence, and you're going to hear about challenges and solutions that can lead to successful communication for both providers and clients. Everybody deserves to be heard. First, Taryn Barlow is a cognitive health coach with her private virtual practice, which is called the Well Brain. Cognitive health coaching is Taryn's creation, and utilizing her skills as a speech language pathologist, a certified international health coach, certified brain injury specialist, and the Amen University certified brain injury professional. Taryn is quite passionate, as you will soon find out, about supporting individuals who've sustained a brain injury and balancing their lives and enabling them to thrive again. Taryn has worked in healthcare in a variety of settings throughout her career, supporting cognitive healing and the medical healing journey. She's very dedicated to what she does and individualizing and customizing care with intentions to maximize quality of life. Ali Rayoun is also joining us today and is just as passionate. She is an award-winning public speaker, a disability advocate, a spokesperson, and an artist who has such an encouraging light in the journey of overcoming brain injury. She was recently named Westfield State University's 2022 Alumna of the Year and was the recipient of the Massachusetts Association of Health, PE, Recreation, and Dance Distinguished Service Award. Ali has a bachelor's degree in movement science and a master's degree in health, physical education, and recreation. She is additionally certified in responsive classroom special populations and WRAP, which is the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. I could go on and on about both of our presenters, but I want to give them as much time as possible. So I'd love to turn things over to them at this point. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be here with everyone. And as we get our slides pulled up for the presentation, we would love to know, where are you joining us from? So go ahead and put that in the chat section. Let us know. Are you in the States? Are you across the seas? Where are you? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Ooh, Utah, Virginia, New York. Wow, Massachusetts. Amazing. Keep it going. All right. And feel free, as Maria said, to utilize that chat as you wish. Questions can go in the question and answer section. And the chat, if you have like an aha moment from the presentation today, feel free to put that in there as well, whatever works for you.
Wow, that chat was just flying with so many places. Thank you so much to NASHIA for inviting Allie and I here to talk today. Our colleague, Amanda Tower from Massachusetts, we'd like to celebrate and thank her very much for making this connection for us today. And so thank you so much, Amanda Tower. There are some very important words we need to set the stage for today through this presentation, and the words are provider and client.
Yes, and you'll see that on our slides as soon as they're pulled up on the screen as well.
Here comes the slideshow. Wonderful. So for this effective communication, provider and client, big important words that are going to carry us through this entire time. So it's important that we all understand where we're coming from. A provider is someone who's providing services. This in particular is highlighted in the world of traumatic brain injury today, providers that are providing service in the traumatic brain injury community. A client is someone who is receiving those services. That is like the meat and potatoes of those two roles today. So who are we? Who are we talking? Who is it that we're talking to today? As far as what Allie and I bring to the table, Maria did a beautiful introduction. I think it's important for Allie and I to speak it as well. So as Maria said, my name is Taryn Barlow. The cognitive health coaching role is something I created. It is a connection from my world as a speech language pathologist here in the state of Massachusetts. You can catch me outside with my family. For fun, I am following my two active boys' sports and activities. We love being outside together, and as well as with my wonderful husband, who is my high school sweetheart.
Aw, so cute. And I'm Allie, as Maria again beautifully shared. I do have lived experience having sustained brain injury and excited to bring that to the table, as well as a background in education. I'm an artist, a public speaker, and a disability advocate in many various roles. And you can find me encouraging and educating on social media. I have so much fun there. And I also love playing with my niece and nephews. Auntie life is the best. And one thing that Taryn and I are quite passionate about together is the concept on this next slide. The fact that everyone deserves to be heard, validated, and accommodated, which, when honored, leads to respect, organized care, and mindful decision making. So we're going to say this, what you see on the slide, we're going to say that again to really, really resonate with it. So everyone deserves to be heard, validated, and accommodated. If you feel that with us, toss an emoji reaction out there, a heart, a thumbs up, and say it one more time with me, wherever you are in your space. Say it out loud, type it in the chat if you want. Everyone deserves to be heard, validated, and accommodated. Now, with that at the forefront of this whole presentation, here's what you can expect today.
Before we go to that next slide, I'm really curious how you're showing up today. Are you showing up, if we could place the poll for our first poll up, are you showing up today with us more aligned with the role of provider or the role of client? Where are you showing up today? really curious. Well, I know what role I'm showing up as. Wonderful. Thank you for taking a second to do that poll. You will see 2 more polls throughout our presentation today. So if that kind of surprised you, anticipate 2 more polls. Wow. We are strongly provider, but we've got some wonderful clients. Interesting what that will mean. Beautiful. So I'm going to let you read this presentation outline on your own, but overall, the theme today is we will move from recognizing the challenges to then educating on communication, and then creating awareness and stating some solutions, because solutions are actions.
And Taryn, what are some of our specific goals today?
We can do that. The goals today are here on our screen and stated. Our goals for this presentation are for everyone, regardless of whether your role as a provider or a client, are that you can get through all of these kind of intentions that we set forward when we planned this out. They're to bring about recognition, make accommodations, and then implement to improve effective communication.
Yes, and essentially here we are going to be stating, we recognize that if you state a problem without an intention of a solution to it, it's kind of just complaining, right? So instead, we have an opportunity to take some problems that have occurred with communication, create solutions, and lead to success. So we want to turn problems into solutions and bridge a gap to exchange frustration for appreciation and flip discomfort to satisfaction. We understand that all of this takes practice and time, and we're here for all of it with you. So with this in mind, let's take a look at some of the impact that we're trying to improve.
So with ineffective communication, it doesn't go quite well. As a provider, I can feel frustrated. I'm not heard, I'm not understood. I can feel ignored. And I can feel this lack of outreach and connection.
Yeah, and as the client, I could also feel frustrated, feel unheard, misunderstood. I could feel isolated, like I don't want to reach out for help anymore. And maybe even misunderstand some of the services that I could be receiving or am receiving, and maybe not even get the correct help.
One of the beautiful resources that we came across had this lovely line in it that really landed for us. Both people are human beings. No one is higher than the other. They are just having a different experience and expectation according to their role, provider or client. So we have research, we have policy, and we have this element of humanity that sets the stage for us to be
A team. Our number one tip in attempting to be a team is to be communicating together, not for or against one another. That's another worthy of repeating statement right there. To be a team, we want to communicate together, not for or against one another. As Taryn stated from the research, we're all human. None of us are better than each other, regardless of credentials or experiences. We're all human. We all make mistakes as well, and the goal is to learn from them. So if a conversation doesn't go well, we can reflect on it and adjust and learn for the next time. Remember within this team aspect that everyone has something to say. Don't people love talking, right? Everyone has something to say. So even if someone is currently in a non-speaking space in their life, they still have something to say. I remember after sustaining brain injury, I was unable to verbally speak for about 3 months. And when people would talk about me or around me, but not with me, I didn't feel a part of a team.
There's some language within the research, communication vulnerability. I loved that language. In regards to traumatic brain injury in particular, as that's our focus, the variety of comprehension, the variety of expression, and processing variables come to light. I also thought of this as a provider myself. I bring in my own communication vulnerabilities as a provider. There are things that I am better at, and other things I will continue to work on. We have talked about these provider and client roles. There's also another vital member of a team that can be part of the traumatic brain injury journey. So we would like to briefly address the role of a support person. We found a description for a support person that, it's important to state this person can be paid or unpaid, who provides direct care to those with disabilities or chronic health conditions. Kind of a generalized description. What's really important as the role of a support person and also engaging with a support person is this idea of least support necessary. If we imagine a range of what least support necessary could be, it's a huge range and it's very person specific. The most support could be the person as the direct communicator and taking notes actively and being very engaged in a communication exchange. Maybe it's someone very quietly sitting in a corner, just note taking, or maybe it's someone who's provided a ride. Now, many times, situations of overhelping as a support person is coming from this beautiful, amazing place of love and compassion. It also can come from a feeling of time pressure. So, as a provider, one of the other roles that's important to state is navigating the third party and how to bring them into and enhance communication rather than hinder communication. A personal experience of mine is using the phrase, I really love the way that you're supporting your spouse. I would love to hear from them about this topic. So we acknowledge where that intention is coming from, but we also bring the other person in.
Yes, absolutely. And with a support person, something that I'd like to point out that is very important right from the waiting room, if you will, is to ask the client, the one that this meeting or appointment is for, ask the client if the support will be coming in, if the support will be joining. Not, hey, do you want your support to come in? Because then feelings get involved and someone may not want to hurt someone's feelings. Just simply, is the support person coming in? And also not making an assumption that just because a client has a support person in the waiting room, it's okay and the client wants them to come in. So just checking in on that before beginning a meeting or an appointment is important. And when there is a support person present, being mindful to still speak to the client. That's very important. Make eye contact, speak to them. If you have to sort of turn and back and forth, whatever works for you. I have a personal example with this as well, where at the beginning, post brain injury, I remember having a neurology appointment, and it was the neurologist, myself, as well as a support person, a family member, and a case worker. And I was struggling to communicate because I was having difficulty with cognition and speech. And the neurologist ended up speaking to my support person and the case manager more than me. It actually turned into an appointment that was basically them three, not really including me. And that wasn't very successful for me. And let's be honest, I could be pretty bitter from that, right? But again, our goal here is to learn from it. So forget the bitterness. We're going to move from bitter to better and keep working on it.
And what's important to state in that situation is that everyone in that room had one intention of supporting a client. The intentions were all there to improve the client's engagement, medical appointment, whatever. They were all there to support that person. So in order to bring this conversation a little bit to life, we'll discuss a provider and client scenarios. And within those scenarios, it's really important that we mention both roles and recognize that we're in this together. So provider and client, here's those words again, all the way through. In this particular situation, Allie will be playing the role of the client and I will be playing the role of the provider. We're going to kind of set the scene. Allie needed some help. She reached out to me as the provider and we set up a meeting.
Awesome. So let's first look at a successful scenario. Wow, that was a hard sentence.
You got it. I come into this successful communication exchange. I've reviewed our previous concerns prior to the call. I inquire about anything that's come up since the last time that we've talked.
And I pull out some notes. I explain a few additional needs and what we need to talk about together.
I make sure that I check for understanding. I can use restating, that we are both knowing where each other's coming from, and then follow up if necessary to clarify.
Oh, all right. Taryn, I feel all set. So we hang up the call and I think to myself, wow, I feel so good. And I cannot wait to share with Taryn how all this is going.
I, as a provider, hang up and feel really good. And I can't wait to hear how things are going next for Allie.
Awesome. Well, what would a challenging scenario look like?
So I enter the room as the provider and I'm rushed and I'm shuffling my papers and I'm gathering information and maybe my back is turned and I'm in the computer reading my notes.
Well, on my end, I recall that I had a question, but I didn't write it down and I am now forgetting what that question was. So there is just crickets, total silence. We decide to end the call.
I'm kind of feeling like I wasted my time because Allie was unprepared.
Oh, yeah? Well, I feel like this was a waste of time because Taryn was so unprepared. Now, okay, if we stop this scenario, we recognize that these scenarios are very real, right? If you think these are real, give us a thumbs up, reaction, emoji, or in the chat. We recognize that because these are so real, it may initiate some feelings of your own from personal experiences. Remember, the awareness will help you grow and move forward to more successful interactions. So let's take some steps forward in appreciation and education together as we start discussing the factors to consider in these situations in order to make them the best that they can be. Part of that is knowing and honoring each other's learning styles.
So we have to know our own learning styles so that we can bring them to the table or meeting. So I'd like to offer another poll here. We would love to know, based on what you see on this screen, what do you perceive your current learning style lean to be? Let's see. So we have visual, auditory, kinesthetic, reading and writing. What do you believe? What do you perceive?
Interesting. Let's see where this goes.
I can't wait.
I know, me too. I'm so excited. We'll give you a minute to do that before we continue in with the learning styles. All right, go ahead and continue doing that. And while you're taking the poll, we want to recognize and consider all of these different learning styles. So the truth is that we're actually often a combination of several or all of them. One of them may be preferred over the others, but it can also really depend on particular situations. For example, if I was feeling physically fatigued, a visual learning style may be better in that situation. However, if you were in a loud environment, you may prefer a kinesthetic, moving type of learning style versus auditory. So within all this, try not to get stuck on only using one. Oh, good thing we're doing a presentation today because it looks like the highest voted learning style was visual. with the lowest being auditory. That's fascinating. Yeah, so keep this in mind. Keep this in mind as we go through these slides, because we want to try to be flexible for as many of them as possible. There could be different situations where what your preferred learning style is may not be able to be approached in that moment. For example, I may hand a piece of paper to you as a provider, and your preferred learning style may not be reading and writing, but that was what worked for me. And so our goal is to meet in the middle with all of this. We'll start by taking a look at the visual learning style. You like that? Was that a good pun? Ah. All right. So the visual is a preference to seeing and observing what's going on or what's being asked of the person. You may recognize that you or the person you're communicating with prefers a visual learning style if the person tends to point things out that they see. For example, a patient walks in the room, a client walks in the room, is like, oh, look at that cool plant over there, right? I did that to Taryn when I first met her in her office. Or maybe somebody you recognize enjoys pictures and written directions. So to honor this learning style, you can consider using videos, photos, and diagrams. The individual may also benefit from being encouraged to draw out what they're thinking, or by using a whiteboard to work things out. With the visual learning style, it's really important to keep colors in mind. Color blocking is a really great strategy to help draw someone's visual field into where you want them to focus. If you look at this slide that is in front of you right now, notice how it was created purposefully with all the colors and the shapes to draw your attention to the text. There is a graphic, but the color blocking draws you to the text, right? And then also keeping in mind with colors that they're calming and they suit learning and attention, that they're not bright neon colors or crazy patterns, but keep it simple for that visual learning. A couple of examples here for a visual learning style could be for the client, you can show a video demonstration. Maybe for the provider could be given pictures of what the patient's describing is wrong. So next, let's talk about the auditory style. I'm on a roll. Wait till you hear the next two. So for the auditory learning style, oh, it looks like Taryn may have froze. So I may need to share my slides instead, unless Maria would, if you have them, you can pull them up as well. Oh, she may be back. Oh, she's logging off.
Goodness.
Okay.
Yeah, let me pop those up for you. Allie, give me just a second.
Oh, she's back. Nope. And off again. Do you maybe want to pull them up anyway, Maria, so that way if that happens again, then we still have the slides?
Happy to.
Awesome. So Tara, Maria's going to pull up the slides and we'll say next slide just in case that were to happen again. Awesome. Well, you know what? The next learning style we were going to talk about anyway is auditory. So at least we're not talking about the visual learning style. I'll talk about it anyway while we're here. So the auditory learning style is a preference to, look at that, listening and speaking. I love the irony of how that occurred. You may recognize that you or the person you're communicating with prefers the auditory learning style if they are talkative and ask a lot of questions. So to honor this learning style, you can consider using questions and conversations for learning, as well as talking through scenarios. The individual could benefit from encouragement to speak to themselves, to work through a task or a problem, or to use the teach back method. The teach back method is when you give some sort of direction and the other person recites it back to you to ensure that they understood. The self-talk is when you encourage someone to sit there and verbally talk through what they're trying to do at that moment. So, for example, I remember being in Taryn's office as a patient at the beginning of my journey, and she would hand me a speech language pathology exercise, and I was supposed to try to problem solve and figure out who was going to the carnival and when and what time it was. And I was encouraged to sit there and verbally say, okay, so if they're going to go at this time, then I think this person would do that, and this is where they're going. And just the encouragement to go ahead and speak out loud while you're processing. A quick tip for the auditory learning style to keep in mind is that it takes time to talk. So if this is the chosen learning style, keeping in mind to use short sentences, leave out extra words or details that are not totally necessary, and try to catch yourself if you start rambling. Make sure you give a break within all of the listening. A couple of other examples here. For a client, that person could be encouraged to talk through a timeline of what happened as you're trying to understand the scenario. And maybe for a provider, you could speak back what the client said to show the client you understand what they were saying. So that's auditory. And now let's move to the kinesthetic learning style. These puns are just my favorite. So for the kinesthetic learning style, this is a preference to movement. By the way, I love that you're finding those funny. Thank you. You may recognize that you or the person you're communicating with prefers the kinesthetic learning style if the person tends to fidget or act out during conversations and directions. So to honor this learning style, you can consider using demonstrations, physical movement, or objects. And the individual may also benefit from using physical cues such as tapping on the shoulder or tapping where the finger is supposed to go for an exercise. A couple other examples are that for the client, to honor this learning style, the client could be encouraged to do physically what is being asked and what is being directed. And the provider could physically demonstrate a skill or an explanation. All right, we have one more. So for the last narrative, we have the style of reading and writing. This is a preference for reading and note-taking. You may recognize that you or the person you're communicating with prefers the reading and writing learning style if the person takes more time to communicate and is often seen jotting things down. To honor this learning style, you can consider using list making, note taking, and written directions. The individual may also benefit from silent breaks to be given time to read or write without interruption, especially with the cognition. If someone is non-speaking, being sure, excuse me, to wait for that person to have time to write on the piece of paper and then ask for their response instead of just rushing through something and they're unable to communicate. Keep in mind the pace of conversation and how quickly you're talking or giving directions for something. And examples of this could be that the client is encouraged to take notes and the provider maybe could be given a written summary of what the client needs.
I love those. This is my lean too, so this one feels really great. Another important thing to consider is that in this reading and writing, there is actually some health and digital literacy information out there. In particular, one of the agencies, the Joint Commission, has some specific recommendations that you can lean into for things like font size, graphic design, and also the choice of vocabulary being at a level that the Joint Commission actually recommends a 5th grade reading level. So now we have talked about these learning styles more. So we're really curious if your perceived learning style that you originally selected, did your initial perceived learning style change? And we're going to pop a poll up there for this. So ponder, what did you pick the first time? And did it change? Interesting opportunity to reflect there. So there's that poll with the yes and no choice. Give you a second. The goal here of this reflection is that we want you to carry this learning style awareness right into your next effective communication opportunity, as we will now add another form of communication, which is body language. Ooh, perfect. It did not change. You guys are good at knowing your learning styles. Now you can implement them. Wonderful. We can move to the body language slide when we're ready. So things to consider for body language. We know, of course, as Ali stated before, that eye contact and eye level are best case scenarios in any conversational exchange. Now, there's this awareness we need to also take that when our mouths are not moving, our body and our face is still communicating. Specifically, as a speech language pathologist, I want to share an experience I've paid attention to within the traumatic brain injury community. There are two similar but very different facial expressions that often show up in this world. One of them is the thinking face. This thinking face is often with your head tilted, your eyebrows kind of furrowed. Many times people will look up as if looking for an answer. And there's this thoughtful expression. Now, the facial expression that's next but different is kind of this beautiful, eyes wide open, staring forward, and maybe even smiling or nodding in agreement. However, is that an empty nod and an empty smile that's kind of more in the giving the expression of overwhelmed, overdone, and not processing? So it's the opportunity to pay attention to those two facial expressions and respond differently to those responses. For example, I give time for thinking and I kind of observe, versus that kind of blank, empty nod, great time for a break. Both patients and clients use body language. Sometimes my face talks louder than my mouth. And I get the joy of catching that and observing it. We both express communication and also comprehension with our body and our face. So it can be very helpful for both people to not forget about this form of communication. Let's now talk about all of this in an external environment and how it impacts communication. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. So the environment, every single environment has an impact on communication. Now that impact could be positive, it can be challenging, it can be neutral. What varies is actually the person's perception of the environment and how they feel within the environment. So I encourage both clients and providers to consider the 5 senses as a first environmental awareness. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel, smell, and taste within an environment? It has an impact on how we use our learning styles and attend and comprehend. I'm going to give an example. Sometimes we wear a fragrance in an environment, and that can have an impact on someone's health. It can certainly have an impact on someone's functioning, attention, and comprehension, as it can actually be a distraction. So here are 2 examples of some clinical settings that we can also refer to kind of put this into a specific environment examples.
Maria, you're so great. Thank you so much. These
So
are
smooth.
two examples of some clinical settings that could be very real, right? I'm curious what you notice as differences between images 1 and 2. If you want to take a moment to look at them, and go ahead and put that in the chat. What are some differences you notice in each of these 2 settings? I'll give you a silent opportunity. to go ahead and process and type. Interesting observations. I see what you're putting there. Yes. I should just have you present. Well done, everyone. Yeah, and go ahead and keep putting those in the chat. And I'm seeing some of these recognitions that I'm going to state, so I'll say them out loud. Number one, the people are facing different directions. They're doing different things. And number two, the two people are sitting facing each other, talking, using a supportive tool. So the question is, what is ideal? It is ideal to sit face to face, not having your back to a client because of working on a computer, being set up to be able to take notes without having to not only have your back to someone, but without the need to constantly turn around, because that constant movement could increase symptoms for a brain injury survivor, can cause some dizziness also if that individual is having to turn back and forth between who they're talking to. And you want to be close enough to feel able to communicate, but not too close that it's uncomfortable. Having supporting items that are organized can be very helpful, not like a pile of 50 papers on a desk that are all shuffled everywhere. And then again, as Taryn mentioned, keeping in mind the senses. So she just talked about fragrances for smell. Now, what about temperature, right? If the room that you're in is freezing, then that is a distraction. And I know you sometimes may not be able to do anything about that, or think of someone who uses their hands to gesture or uses sign language to communicate, right? If their hands are so cold and they need to sit on them to warm up, that can impact communication, or vice versa with if it's too hot. So this is an in-person environment, but on the next slide, we'll talk about what about virtual calls? Because let's be real, we've started out with Zoom just wondering, like, where is the mute button? What does this thing do? To now having all these super fancy options to navigate. And with this, I encourage you to go ahead and really process this and take some notes. If you're the writing learning style preference, take physical notes. If you prefer visual, maybe take a screenshot right now. But take a moment to really think about your environment and what we're going to talk about with video calls, because we have a little Goldilocks situation here. The background can be very impactful, especially for those who have sustained brain injuries due to vestibular and visual challenges. It can be very person specific, so none of this is an all or nothing scenario. And in this little Goldilocks situation, we'll go through these. So all the way on the left, this visual with a graphic design in the back is considered to be too busy. Any virtual backgrounds that are full of trees and graphics, or if there's no virtual background, but behind you is something like a bookshelf that's full of all different books and trinkets, that's all very busy and can be very distracting to a client. In fact, Taryn and I have worked very closely together. For example, the wall behind her used to have like 6 pieces of art, and we helped her narrow it down to 3, and where her head is not in front of any of them. These little things can make a really big difference with visual processing and attention for communication. Now, the middle graphic on this slide is that it depends, right? A blurred background is better than a very busy background. However, keep in mind, with any virtual background, there's like this vortex that happens when the person moves, and that can lead to symptoms for someone who has sustained brain injury and impact attention, which impacts communication. And then lastly is what's just right. Just right is ultimately, ideally, having a plain background or only a couple simple things in the background. And the plain is ideal for the focus of communication and attention. And again, keeping in mind the senses, right? So if we talk about sight and continue on that, the light source of your environment is very important. It's better to have light that's coming towards your face instead of having light that is behind you. If you notice in Taryn's setting, She has a window behind her and has so mindfully bought curtains that can totally block out the light so it's not affecting communication. It's also important to have a really stable screen so the screen isn't moving, because I know for me that can make me feel nauseous, right? Again, if that brain injury side. And also being mindful of screen sharing. If the mouse is moving all over the place, that can also lead to some symptoms or difficulties. And scrolling can also lead to a lot of symptoms, which again can affect communication. That can wear out someone's processing so quickly and lead to an inability to communicate. And then also with especially a virtual call is the sound. So you are used to your environment, but the person you're meeting with is not used to your environment. So you may be used to a grandfather clock that goes off at 1 p.m. But if I hear that, it's going to affect communication for me because it caught me off guard. I don't know what's going on. And someone who experiences auditory processing challenges, any additional noise is a barrier to communication. And I also, other things that I see often are, say a client has a dog barking. The suggestion would be to just mute right away. Mute, figure out the dog, come on back. Because again, I may be used to the dog, but the person I'm meeting with may be over there struggling and wanting to like, oh my goodness. Or as a provider, if you're typing, taking notes as you're meeting with the person and the person can hear you're typing, that can also affect communication. So these are things to keep in mind as you evaluate and maybe alter some of your settings as well, keeping in mind it's a learning curve for everyone.
Yeah, and the best thing that we can do is just ask. When you meet with someone, and give each other the opportunity to reflect on the environment. Is there something within my environment that is having an impact on you? Please feel comfortable speaking it to me, because how someone perceives it is different, and we're open and we will be as flexible as possible within our things that are our control, but we give each other that respect. Should I tell them how many curtains it took me to purchase these ones? Just so many. It was a process. I've worked really hard for this environment with lots of intentions. So this is a learning process, as Ali said. So we're going to go full circle here. If I could, the key here is remember that everyone deserves to be heard, validated, and accommodated. That has taken us through this entire presentation from start to finish. It is our favorite thing. It is why this presentation came to be.
Yes, and remember, it is important to have this communication toolbox that we've helped you fill today for every interaction that you have from this point forward. Keep in mind, you don't want to overstuff your communication toolbox, but also don't just leave it at home. Bring it everywhere you go. It will take some practice, so remember to give yourself grace and space as you continue learning and adapting with those around you.
So today we've shared with you 2 resources that you can add to your communication toolbox. And one of them is the handout. I'm going to show you the hard copy that these will get to you. Effective communication handout. And in addition, a helpful communication phrases handout that Ali and I have built. Communication phrases are some of our favorite things for advocacy and communication. This is some resources for you, and we hope you find them helpful. The next 4 slides, I'm going to have Maria move through quickly. They are the citation pages, so if you're interested in them, you can ask. For anyone who needs to take the visual break, now's a great time. And when we get to the 4th slide of this little scroll effect, it will be our contact page. So now the scrolling is done and you can return to the screen to see how to connect with us.
Yeah, and feel free to screenshot this as well if you want, because we don't expect you to remember all this information in 5 seconds.
No, we are so grateful to have you join us today. We were talking with Maria before. Allie and I truly love presenting individually as a team. It really lights us up to engage in these sort of presentations. And this topic, as you can tell, we are really passionate about, and our two worlds combined so beautifully to bring this to light. So we are going to engage in some questions now, and feel free to go ahead and put your questions in either the Q&A or the chat to see what you come up with.
All right.
Let's see.
Delightful. Thank you. And it's funny that you talked about backgrounds because we were talking about that before we went live today. And I have some concerns with a few things in my background that I'm going to be thinking about. I mean, part of it is being mindful, right?
Absolutely.
I took a couple of notes about some things that individuals had put in the chat, both comments and questions. One was on something we probably need to be mindful about related to our that first poll question. Some attendees are both clients and providers, so they wanted the option to pick both.
Guess what? You're correct. I am a provider and a client. I provide services, but I also have to go into the healthcare world and receive services. So there are many of us that are both. Many of us that are both. If you're providing service in this space, you are also navigating the healthcare world. Bringing about those two experiences actually allows you to take this message from today and apply it twofold.
Awesome. I can answer one of these. Yes, the recording will be made available later. It will be posted on our website so you can watch it as often as you'd like. Something that's come up more than once is, how do you find a support person?
I'll speak a little bit on that from having lived experience post brain injury. So it depends where you live. Of course, there's family and friends, right? And encouraging communication of asking, not hesitating to ask if you need help. Remember that you are not a burden and you are not responsible how someone else feels about being asked for help. When somebody is ready and willing to, they can step up to the plate. And in addition to that, there's a lot of organizations out there who their main role is to help you get a support person. So for example, in Massachusetts, depending on even Mass Health is one of our medical insurance coverages. They have programs where you can be evaluated by a nurse for a personal care assistant. And that person can help in the home with ADLs, activities of daily living, or that person can help you, like in this talk today, go out to an appointment with you and help you take notes or get you there. So there's a lot of various programs out there. And then there's, of course, local brain injury associations and whatnot too, that have all these different resources. So wherever you live, checking out websites, NASHIA's website, all the different brain injury associations for different states, and asking a social worker can actually be one of the most helpful connections to resources, is what I have personally found.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question earlier on was, in telehealth or virtual visits, does the provider discuss with the patient what will happen if a call is dropped or if internet is unstable? Good question.
Well, isn't that kind of spot on, right? Yes, before this presentation, we did discuss what would happen and had a backup plan. Myself personally, as a virtual provider, yes. I state out loud to clients that if disconnected, will utilize the phone. We have a backup plan that is actually specific kind of to the person. I'm allowed that flexibility. But yes, there should be a what happens if, and if the provider doesn't initiate that, go ahead and Appreciate it yourself. What happens if I'm disconnected? How do I reconnect with you? Go ahead and do that work, because both of you are 50-50. So whoever speaks it first, kudos. Kudos.
I'm going to add to that as well from the provider perspective, or mindfulness, to be aware if an appointment's running late and it's a virtual appointment, communication about that to the client is extremely important. I know there's times I've had an appointment at, say it was supposed to be 1, and then I'm like, 1:30 rolls around and I'm like, if you're in an office, you can go ask a secretary. But if you're meeting virtually, you have to try to call the office. You may not even get through to someone, or maybe you try to send a message on the portal and you're like, nobody reads it. So as a provider, if you are delayed in an appointment, or maybe this is something the secretaries can do for you if you're in a practice like that, having that communication for the client, especially with brain injury, is so helpful, because our threshold is so small already. We navigate like this much energy a day. And if our energy is spent sitting, like waiting and wondering, our cognition decreases every minute we're wondering and waiting.
Definitely.
When in doubt, ask and communicate.
Yeah.
Both people. It's really hard to over communicate.
I agree. A question in the Q&A. Taryn, you mentioned a question that you ask a client about the person who is with them. Can you repeat that?
Yes. I'm not sure if it was me or Allie, but we both do this. Okay. I will say, I love that you're here supporting your spouse or friend or sister or whatever the role. I love that you're here supporting them. I would love to hear from them about this. And like I said, it's a compliment. I see how you're loving them, supporting them, and I want to hear their perspective. So it's both.
Good.
Thank you for asking me to repeat that.
Thank you. Another question. Why is it so hard after a brain injury to pay attention to more than one person speaking? For instance, while at work or in a conference room, when 2 or more people are talking at the same time, it's very challenging and overwhelming. It was never a problem to pay attention and listen to multiple speakers before my TBI. Any suggestions?
Hi, my name is Allie. That has been my life. It is, first of all, let me validate that that is very real and very common after brain injury. There's a couple of perspectives there, depending on what could be occurring with someone, and I'll let Taryn add to this as well. What I've learned from research and personal experience, on one hand, there can simply be overstimulation. And when someone's feeling overstimulated, it's hard to focus on anything. And so if that's the case, where the nervous system is so over aware and in such overdrive that you hear noises that you never used to hear before, it can be helpful. And this is the majority, by the way. This is the majority experience, unless there's actual damage to certain nerves. That's a different story. But in a broad spectrum, it can be really helpful to work on progressing with noise tolerance. So if you think about going from your home, which may be really, really quiet and nothing's really going on, sure, you can pay attention there, right? But then challenging yourself, go to a cafe every now and then and try to meet up with one friend and practice that environment at a non-busy time, and then progress in your tolerance of noises and telling yourself that you're safe. Taryn taught me this, noticing the noises, telling yourself, oh, the noise I hear, that person's talking, there's a vent that just turned on. Okay, I'm safe. Those are just noises. Now I can ignore them. Because one of the things that happens is if your nervous system is in such overdrive, you're actually don't realize this, but could be feeling nervous about the noises. And that is what is impacting your attention. So that is one hand. And again, there's many. In another more rare but possible situation is actually what I experienced. I ended up navigating auditory processing disorder, which is I had actual nerve damage, and I had evaluation done by a neurotologist. And that what that means is because of nerve damage, I've actually struggled with the ability to neurologically cancel out other noises. And I actually use a hearing device that blocks out surrounding noises and only allows me to focus on who's right in front of me. And that's helpful. So there's a couple of answers, I guess, if you will. Taryn, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, she's frozen again. I
Oh,
think
no.
I'm confident in that's the majority that I've seen, again, unless there's actual brain damage.
Yeah, it was really big to be able to have somebody label and state out loud the distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Because your brain is working really hard while you're in the middle of a task to stay focused. But if your brain is working to relabel and refile the environment, it's good to say, I realized that I was working and I heard a truck in the distance. I realized I am working and trying to focus and I feel cold. Stating it out loud so that it's giving this brain time to process again what these distractions are. And it increases your.
Yeah, and it helps desensitize the nervous system, which is, I never realized how much of a factor that was with communication and attention. Simply pointing out noises and saying, I'm safe.
For sure. I'm going to reiterate what I had said before about CEs and certificates, because I see that question in here more than once. While I do that, would the two of you put your contact information in the chat? Some people had a difficult time capturing the screen, even if it's just a phone number or just your email. That would, I think, be helpful for folks. So
I'll put my website.
Yeah, you will receive after the webinar concludes, it'll be later today or it'll be in the morning, an automated email from NASHIA that has the evaluation in it. Once you complete that, there will be information there about getting your certificates or your CE. So all you have to do is wait for that and you'll get it. If for some reason that doesn't happen, you can always email me, always, and I'll put my email in the chat again as well. Another question that's in here is a best practice to interview the provider before you go to them.
Can you tell we both love that? Oh, she froze again. I was going to let her go first.
That's a good face to freeze for that question.
It is very curious. You know, the face that we were talking about with body language, the like curious, that was a good curious face. Taryn, do you want to go first on this one?
Yes, I love this. It is wonderful in the traditional medical model to call ahead if you're looking for a provider and go ahead and say, I'm looking to get an evaluation and I'm looking to be evaluated by whatever specialty. I'm looking for someone who has knowledge in traumatic brain injury or concussion or stroke, or state the intentions. I'd love to connect with them before scheduling an appointment. That may or may not take a couple of calls. It has massive value to feel that out. So yes, fully encourage that.
Yeah, and I'll give an example of this. I, a couple years ago, was looking to restart physical therapy because I've had on and off bouts of it. And I was looking to do a new type of physical therapy. I've done so much, I forget which one it was. Say it was vestibular physical therapy. And for me, it is like, of course, I want a good connection, right? Good communication, good connection with the provider. So I did. I called up the establishment and I said, hey, you know what? If the couple of PTs were recommended to me, would it be possible when they have a break if they could just give me a quick call? And I'll say this of encouragement as a client, making sure to honor the provider's time. If they're going to give you their time, to honor that time and not ask too many questions. Just a couple that help you also in your interaction. How do you feel with that provider? because a part of communication is feeling, right? And if you feel uneasy every time you go to an appointment, it's not going to be as successful as when you feel calm and your nervous system feels safe. So it is beneficial when it works out to call ahead, or even if it's the secretary and you're not able to speak to the provider directly, but if the secretary has knowledge of, oh yeah, people ask this question all the time, here's the top 2 providers that we usually connect patients with.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that, it's okay as the provider to say, yes, thank you so much for reaching out. I do recognize that I have about 3 minutes or 5 minutes to talk with you, so that you have set an intention for that. Or as the client being able to say, I appreciate 2 minutes of your time, and sticking to that. Because I know in the model where clients are back to back to back to back to back, that time is precious, because you want them to give the time to the client that you might be. So being specific with your questions versus a long, that's what you'll do in the first appointment, is go through all the details.
I see lots of back and forth in the chat. I can't even read through them all. They're moving so quickly. And I see that some of you are responding to some of the things in the chat with some really good answers. If someone doesn't agree to have a consult with you, what do you do?
If someone doesn't agree to have a consult with you. Oh, so like if you say I'm a patient and calling an
Mhm.
office and I want to meet with a provider and they, okay. You know what? I'll tell you what I would do from a patient perspective. One, this is important for anywhere in life, even outside of the medical world, is to remember that some things are meant to be and some are not. Um, and just because someone's been recommended to you, it doesn't mean that they are going to be the best fit for you. So kind of just trusting the process and releasing control of that. There's some things we cannot control in life, and that's okay. And it's okay if you had your mind set on it and it didn't work out. There's going to be someone else out there for you. So I think that mindset is very important. And then on the other hand, if you do call an office and you really want to work with someone, maybe you could ask why, because I think assumptions can be the other downfall of communication or experiences. So simply asking, oh, do you mind if I ask why this doesn't seem to be working out right now? And if they say, oh, the patient load is full, okay, that makes sense, right? Or oh, we didn't receive enough information about you. Oh, well, we could work on that. I could send you some more. So asking the why as well.
Beautifully stated. Yeah. Go with there's the important to lean into the feel, right? It's okay to release that timing. It's uncomfy, but uncomfy is often growth, and another opportunity could be coming your way that you're just not sure about.
Yeah.
Definitely. Just want to make sure.
If I can jump in, I saw a couple comments of individuals with experience within the medical world and navigating life after brain injury. Just as our whole presentation has touched on, I just want to reiterate that what you've been through is very valid, and the feelings you've experienced on either side of the spectrum here are very valid. If you've had experiences in the past that did not go well, it's okay that that happened. It's okay to accept that that happened and recognize the feelings from it. The goal within what our presentation was today is to learn how to use better strategies and tools and awareness to improve for the future. So it does take, I've had to work a lot on the emotional and mindset piece because I've had some really challenging situations with gaslighting or just being told it's all in my head or things that just didn't feel good to me. But now I feel so much more confident and empowered because I've learned these communication tools to be able to help me going forward.
Part of the reason we've brought this effective communication, is because Allie and I have been on both sides. I can share that I am the mama of a boy who was born with his esophagus not connected. I was his advocate before he had language. So I was the communicator for him. And so this communication is coming from having been the patient's communicator, the support person, and also as the provider. So, you know, Allie and I both have been in these situations where we could feel certain ways, but we are choosing to take each of the challenging moments and improve on them, make them better, communicate. It is very easy to feel invalidated, which is why we're empowering you to feel validated and powerful in your effective communication. What you've been through is real. We sit there with you. And we encourage you to do one thing from today to give yourself that kind of lift in your communication.
Definitely. Kristen posted several things in the chat. She had 6 points in here that she wanted you guys to respond to. And Kristen, I wish we had time to run through those. If it's okay with you, I will save those and put them back out to Taryn and Allie to maybe provide some responses for, and we can post that as well or send that to you. But there's this last one that she put on here was that providers sometimes demand clients fill out forms or engage online on a portal without any contact. But if somebody has challenges using the technology to do that, and then they even maybe want to shame the client about not knowing how to use technology. Any response to that?
Oh, yeah. As a provider, there are certain forms that are safety nets for both the patients and clients and providers. Those are the kind of have to moments. However, when you receive those sorts of forms or virtual communication expectations and you feel challenged by those, replying to the provider that with clarity, at this time, the length of this form would take me a month to fill out. Or is there someone within your office that I can sit down and go through this out loud? It is actually one of the things that I do with people is to work through forms because the medical world has forms. It is the nature of that beast. However, there are supports and ways to ask for accommodations to access the technology and or receive hard copies in the mail. That's still a thing. Snail mail still real. So that you can sit down with the paperwork and ask for family support as well to get through paperwork. I'm going to let Allie reply because paperwork is a thing.
It is a thing. And the most common scenario that paperwork occurs is a new patient or new client appointment. So an awareness from that client or patient perspective is to be proactive and when you schedule the appointment, however far away, saying, hey, are there going to be any forms to fill out? And if there are, can I please have them now ahead of time so I can already have them filled out when I arrive? That's been very helpful.
Right. Learning to be a solid self-advocate is important, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna, again, just so many great comments in the chat. I wish we had more time. We do not. But I appreciate you answering as many of those as you possibly could. And for all the information that you've shared. You've got the contact information for our presenters as well as my contact information in the chat. And we've sort of come to a close. I just want to share a couple of things before we wrap up with all of you. We certainly hope that you enjoyed today's webinar. If you did, please join us for many of the other training opportunities that we have coming down the chute, as well as the conferences that we host, our other products, our podcasts, our leading practices academies, All that information is located on our site. And if you'd like to get more detailed information, you can certainly contact us to be put on our mailing list. Our archived webinars are available online for other presentations that we've done. And don't forget to complete your evaluations after today's webinar. For sure, we appreciate that feedback. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate your energy.
Thank you.